for several weeks. These are just indicative rates. We can't hold them to those over a long period of time without investor commitments. And so while it's not a 100% certain process, it's the most effective process we can derive and evaluate to select an underwriter on your behalf, with cost being the consideration. Again, all 6 of these firms are more than capable, so if you have a preference other than the 2 low proposals, we are certainly happy to work with any of the 6 firms. I'll stop there. Jamie, did I miss anything?
I just want to add, you referenced the parameters ordinance, which had already been advertised. It's on display here if anybody wants to see it. We're required to do that. That is an ordinance that is put in place to set the framework for borrowing parallel to the final design of the facility. So once that final design's in place, once even bids are in, or once we have a better sense of the numbers, then this parameters ordinance has a maximum of $60 million.
Yes.
That's a ceiling. That doesn't mean that's what it's going to be. That means that you can go that far. So it's almost, I guess my closest comparison is being pre-approved for a mortgage, so to speak. You know, you have at least the ability to access and do the borrowing. We will be going through another S&P rating, a brief one, not quite. It'll be, I guess, a refresh.
Yes.
Thing. And they've already contacted the controller, so that's,
great.
That's in process. I think that's everything. So I'm anticipating on October 7th you'll have the parameters ordinance. This is a component to it that has to be inserted, so that's why we're talking about this today. So those underwriters, whatever you decide to do, will be a part of that ordinance.
Commissioner?
Yes, I had a question. Jay, are you recommending, like, I'm going to pull a number out of thin air, if we borrow $30 million, that 50% be listed with each of these underwriters?
So the allocation on a percentage basis, as you recall, I think 50-50, given how close the proposals are, is a reasonable start. But if you'd like somebody to be quote-unquote in charge, make it 55-45. The allocation's up to you. I'm just suggesting that they're so close that they both be named as your underwriting team.
And what is an advantage to having 2 instead of 1?
Well, from our side, our job is to make sure that the bonds are sold on market. So the more feedback we get, the more input we receive, the more comfortable we are in the information we're getting and the argument we're going to put in front of you as to what a fair transaction is. Having said that, if you want just 1, we're okay with that. I was just trying to, it was a virtual tie.
And 2 gives you, as you just said, gives you more information.
Gives us more information, yes.
In previous experience with RBC, we've had.
You have, and Stiefel, through this similar process, was the underwriter on the last transaction.
Yeah, Piper Sandler would be new to us.
Would be new to you, yes.
Still a
Do you
firm.
have other counties or municipalities that use Piper Sandler? What is the experience with them?
I didn't bring that with me. I can speak more definitively to RBC. RBC represents Lancaster County, Dauphin County.
I'm familiar with RBC. I'm just wondering about.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with.
I would
Piper
have to
Sandler.
go back and check Stiefel's
Okay, that's
proposal.
fair.
Off the top of my head, I can't name counties they've done.
Piper.
I'm sorry, Piper. Yeah. What we look for is experience in Pennsylvania with similar type projects. So projects that are backed by taxing power, similar credit rating, specific to counties. I can't answer that question, but I'll get back to you. It's a
I
good question.
appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
And one other on this. This process itself, you believe, is a savings by just introducing competition rather than, because you could simply tap an underwriter and say, we want you to do it.
The only firm here that charged their standard rate is PNC. I can tell you that the others are about half of what they normally would charge. So for you on a $50 million financing, the savings are upwards of $160,000.
Just by introducing competition.
Just by introducing the process, yes.
Mark?
No,
No.
I didn't, no, I'm sorry. I think I scratched my head.
Oh,
So there really is.
It's a good thing it's not an auction.
I know.
You'd be the winner.
I'm really in trouble.
So action on this would take place in the ordinance itself, where the underwriter or underwriters would be
Named specifically.
So essentially, today, I think it's just we need some guidance on whether you want to maintain or you want to introduce the two into the ordinance, and then that will actually be in front of you in a couple of weeks. So.
We're a little ahead of your project schedule, but we didn't want to be behind, so that's the reason we were scheduled to be here today.
You don't see any movement of any significance in rates?
The market's holding pretty steady. The 10-year Treasury, which is what we kind of follow day to day to measure market moves, has ranged from a 1.2 to it's about a 1.3 this morning over the last, I would say, 2.5 months. We had an early move back in the beginning of the year as everybody thought we were going to get inflation with all of this federal stimulus.
Yeah.
It's looking like maybe the inflation is not as bad as people were suggesting, and frankly, the Fed wants some inflation, so I think the Federal Reserve Board is actually very pleased with what's happening in the marketplace. Their first step, we believe, based on all the comments they have made thus far, is that they'll begin what they call tapering, which is to reduce the number of bonds they're buying into their portfolio in the marketplace. That will be the first test of how the market reacts to a little different direction of the Fed trying to influence interest rates. But the market at the moment appears to be very settled and very firm. So if you're looking at 2 to 4 to 6 weeks, we see very little change. There are some things that have been introduced into the, I guess it'd be the infrastructure bill, that would allow for more tax-exempt financings. If that were to occur, we would see more supply. The Pennsylvania tax-exempt market is very, very sensitive to supply and demand factors, moves more based on supply and demand, frankly, than it does U.S. Treasury rates. The supply through the summer months has been very light for a variety of reasons, and so that has also helped to hold rates low.
I think our timing is probably as good as it gets in terms of not only our bond rating, but also our short-term debt as a county. All those kind of things seem to be aligning
Yeah,
nicely.
it's actually working out very well. Your current debt structure rolls off in a couple of years, so we're able to add this debt without really overburdening the near-term budget. And so, yes.
And the other comment, which I think we've talked about before, is the sticker shock of the project. But in light of school districts that routinely do $40 million buildings for 1,600 students, this is a project that it touches every life in the county. So 140,000 people are impacted by this. And as Jamie's often said, this will be the last building standing in the county should something, catastrophic happen. That's what it's built to be. So it's kind of unique in that respect, but also, although it's the largest project we're going to do, school districts have a lot more practice in it than we do.
And there's a lot of
That's what-
technology in this project as well, so
Yeah, that's true.
it looks like a lot of money, but it's not all bricks and mortar.
Correct.
And redundancy, I've been saying, the redundancy of
Yeah.
the systems in the building so that it can stay in operation is very expensive.
Yeah, I mean,
Imagine
even
building your house and having 3 different,
Furnaces.
cooling and heating systems in it. That's just what it is.
even simple projects like an MDJ building in today's marketplace with all the security and IT look extraordinarily expensive on a square foot basis, but that's the cost of building buildings that are protecting the people who use them.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said, and I just wondered, is there an update? Do you know anything about building material prices and supply? Is that going to hold us up or cause us heartache?
Well, cost doesn't, assuming the costs come in within your budget. So the supply chain is still very, very disrupted, I'll say it that way. It's improved in some areas, and things like lumber prices are starting to come back down. So a lot of that spike we saw earlier in the summer months was due in a large part to speculators in the marketplace. So there are lumber futures that people were bidding up. But like any market, as soon as prices start rising, people start producing. And so once the production comes online and you can actually receive materials, cost starts to come back down again. We're being told that the biggest disruption in the supply chain currently is still chips for things like appliances or any equipment, automobiles, that require chip processing capabilities within that piece of equipment. So if you drive by a new car a car dealership today, most of them look like they're going out of business. There are very few cars on the lot. They cannot get cars on the lot to sell them. Construction materials, slow, but not as bad as, those very specific chip markets.
In the design of this building, I know throughout the process, they've had to pivot to different, for example, the steel skeleton, rather than being bar joists, they might be I-beams instead, because bar joists are, 8 months away from when you order them. So they have made some optional, made some differences in the design based on
Supply.
them knowing what the supply chain is.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I'm ready to go. I've been ready to go for a long time. I just wondered if that would hold us up and delay construction and completion of the building.
I can't speak on behalf of the general contractor, but generally speaking, it should not hold you up.
Okay.
Is there a motion needed today, or just guidance?
No motion
not-
needed.
If you're okay with the recommendation on the two, being almost a tie here and in introducing both of them so that the process is more informed and so on, then we can go ahead and have bond counsel just insert those into the ordinance, and then it'll come for you
So
for action.
I'm okay. I guess having an experience with
RBC.
RBC, I was trying to think of the full name, but that's okay, RBC's good. I'd prefer the suggestion of 55-45 with RBC with
And-
making the decision.
And Jamie and I did discuss that, and I said, frankly, given your experience with RBC, it probably would make sense to have them be, quote, in charge. So if
Yeah.
you want to weight it a little more towards them, we are certainly fine.
I mean,
with that.
I think I'd feel more comfortable with a known quantity there.
The individual who we would be working with is still there, and someone that I work with on
Yes.
refunding and so on. So Brian Bradley's someone that's known at RBC.
Okay, we'll take that recommendation. We good? All right, Jake.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you
Okay,
so
thank you,
much.
Mr. Wenger.
We will plan to be back here in October. If your project isn't ready to move, we'll just delay again.
Okay,
All right?
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.